On today's show, we wind the clock back to 2016 and head to Sydney Motorsport Park as we celebrate Australian motor racing history with highlights from the 12th running of the Australian Muscle Car Masters. Then we head across to Europe for round 3 of the inaugural SRO eSport GT Series. With Silverstone and Spa Francorchamps in the record books, the stars of the GT World Challenge Series get set to virtually take on the legendary Nurburgring. This is Speedweek.
It's a celebration of everything that's muscle car. The sights, the sounds, and the machinery. It's also a celebration of the men who drove these beautiful, iconic, grunty beasts and became national sporting icons. A chance to get up close and personal and give thanks for their contribution to the Australian motorsport landscape. This is a trip down memory lane. Welcome to Sydney Motorsport Park and the 12th running of the Australian Muscle Car Masters. Hello and welcome, folks, to Sydney Motorsport Park for what will be a fantastic day. The memories will be as thick as molasses and the mile per hour will be monumental. And speaking of which, when it comes to monumental, Luke West knows muscle car racing inside out. Westy, great to have you on the show, mate.
Wade, a big day out, the 12th annual Muscle Car Masters, and I can't wait.
It's an amazing event. It's steeped in tradition, and it really is steeped in tradition because there's no event that has a bigger celebration, I don't think, of muscle car racing than this weekend.
Yeah, it's the best of historic racing and also retro racing. So we're not locked into those usual historic categories, so we've got lots of different cars put on a show today.
Looking forward to a massive weekend of racing. The weather is going to be fantastic, I'm sure. Let's get into it. Well, it's time. This is an iconic group of motor cars right here as we ride on board with David Wall. Gotta love the old H pattern there on the right-hand side. Luke West, we go from 2-litre. We go from a Datto 1600 to a 7-litre Chevy Camaro. All bases are covered.
Not only that, Wade, we've also got some of the most famous cars ever to grace a grid in Australia. Some big names have driven these vehicles over the years. Some big names are racing them now.
Yeah, when you look at David Wall, whose family have such a proud history as well. Des, the late Des Wall, was such a great competitor in sports sedans, and it's so cool to see these days David getting behind the wheel of the Mustang as well. Great shot of Glenn Seaton, and we are underway. Look at the Tirana get out of the hole there, Luke.
Yeah, got a great start, the white XU1. So did Seaton, pokes his nose out in the Brian Thompson. Camaro goes round the outside of David Wall, who will emerge through turn number 2 in the lead.
Look at this, all the turns lock to lock on David Wall here inside the Mustang. Cito on the outside. They're side by side for the first. Oh! Torrey's gone a little bit wide. We've got a Capri in there. You've got Mustangs, Tiranas, a Camaro as well, and Wall retains the number 1 position.
And excitingly, Wade, that is the very car that Pete Gagan won 3 consecutive Australian Touring Car Championships in, 67 to 69.
I just remember that iconic shot of Gagan on the right rear wheel coming onto the main straight at Oran Park, one of the truly iconic photographs from that era.
Yeah, got some crazy angles, didn't he? So in that Mustang, win ratio, ridiculous win ratio, particularly when we considered it was up against the likes of Moffat's Mustang.
The Charger in there as well, bright pink. Hey Charger, the number 93 car making its way through here as well. You can see why people just flock to see this kind of racing these days. It just casts you back to a really happy time in a lot of people's memories when they were growing up. They used to stand around at all these iconic circuits, Symmons Plains, Oran Park back in the day, Amaroo Park, places like that, Luke.
Yeah, and some of the blokes that were actually hanging over the fence back in the day, the guys behind the wheel now. David Wall out in front from Glenn Seaton, John Bow. So 3 drivers competed at the very top.
Apex Replicas bringing us your Group NC race here today at Sydney Motorsport Park. We come back onto the main straight and Cito is a busy boy checking the mirrors.
Certainly is. He's aboard the Peter Sportelli Camaro. Doesn't quite have the mumbo to try and draw up behind David Wall's Mustang.
Now that's what he was looking for. I think that might be John Bow directly in behind him. And you saw the GTS steering wheel when we had the onboard shot of John Bow before. Bow all over the back of him in the big, gotta love that, TAA and Total down the side.
Actually, he's the teammate to David Wall, so both the cars in first and third. So that's David Wall and John Bow, owned by Wall Racing. So the ex-Bob Jane, Monaro, we're on board that car now with John Bow. And here's another of these famous cars that competed for the Australian Touring Car Championship and then later on in sports sedans back in the early 70s.
I love how narrow the steering wheel is. You can just see Bowie, without a doubt, one of the most iconic drivers in Australian motorsport history. As we take a look at the Charger, big, heavy, cumbersome car compared to, say, right there, the Capri just running through, the little Tiranas, which was so dominant in their time, and of course the GT Falcon.
Yeah, John Burke aboard that Charger, and if you're going to have a Charger, you don't want to have a white one or a silver one. You want to have the hilarious colour, don't you?
Here's a look at the replay right now. You can see JB just bogged it down a little bit just then. And man, this is where Cito got him on the outside and Wall was able to hold sway. I thought Seaton for a second. This is a great start. This is classic Glenn Seaton.
Very true. Actually, you don't see John Bow make a dud start very often. It wasn't a particularly bad one. It was just Seaton got a really good one.
And by John Bow standards, he kind of curses himself, doesn't he? Because he is so very good at everything he does. Tirana here, the 202 entry just peeling into the right-hand side. And the Mustang just in behind. NC class, huge field, well over 25 cars here today. Yeah,
great variety when you get down the field a little bit. You've got the Capri, you've got the Hemi 6 for the Charger, you've got an RX2 out there too, and then the 6-cylinder XU1, all sorts of makes and models, and also engine configurations too.
Oh man, as a Ford fan, my blood just absolutely runs right down the middle when you see a GT HO. You saw the HO Power number plate just right there. Great shot as they work their way in towards this first race of the day for our muscle car masters. The Tirana was such a lightweight little car, wasn't it?
Yeah, it certainly was. If you just squint a little bit, you could swear that it was Bathurst 1972 with the Phase 3 up against the XU1. And of course, it was a wet day that day, and it meant that gave a bit of advantage to the smaller car, with Brock winning his first victory there, but in the dry conditions, much harder for the Tirana drivers today.
It really had Alan Moffat's brow furrowed back in the day when the Tiranas emerged, didn't they? They're just a great little car, extremely nimble and very, very powerful for a car that size.
We're looking at Mark Blyfield in his battle. We were looking, and now we go to this. Love that magenta, the magenta-coloured Charger. And he's now zooming in on the Capri. Got those famous, on the Capri, got those famous Cologne blue and white. Remember the old Cologne Capris?
Cologne blue and white, I like that, Luke. The Chargers came out with 6s and also with an 8 as well, didn't they?
Yeah, a little bit later on, and there's all been lots of conjecture over the years as to did Charger or did Chrysler plan to take the V8 up to Bathurst? Lots of arguments for Mopar fans, but never happened. Only ran the 6 in the Bathurst 500 and then in its last start in the 1000 of 73.
Just watching Darrell Hansen there in the 145, the Mustang just ahead of the 113 of Alan Main, the RX2. So we really are covering a very broad range of competitors and cars here for Group NC.
So Group NC, you think it's more the domain of the V8s, but we're seeing the wide variety there. There's the problem, I'm pretty sure, for the RX2. He loses a position, does he? No, but must have missed, the 113 car must have missed a gear.
Awfully easy to do with the H pattern, mate.
Absolutely.
Not quite as simple as a sequential gearbox these days that the supercars use. Very tight part of the racetrack here to see where the Tirana is quicker. And just look at the RX now, all over the back of the Charger, as you would expect.
You'd be thinking the Charger's brakes are beyond its best, but similar thing would be happening to the Mustang there as we get towards the end of this race.
Beautiful conditions for racing here today. The Muscle Car Masters weekend is certainly steeped in tradition. We're up to 12 of them now, so well over a decade's worth of this concept. Where did it start, this whole idea?
Well, it came off the back of the boom of interest in Australian muscle cars and American muscle cars now, as we see the Mustang get ahead of the Charger. And that was, remember, back in about 2000 and 2002. And then from there, explosion in values as we see the fight back from the Charger.
Yeah, the 93 car of John Burke, the RT, just closing in, bit of flame out the side there as well. We're into the final lap of Group MC, brought to us by Apex Replicas here at the Muscle Car Masters weekend at Sydney Motorsport Park.
Yeah, just to finish off on my point, so about a dozen years ago, explosion in values of these cars. It spawned Australian Muscle Car magazine, and it spawned also this fantastic event held at Sydney Motorsport Park.
Great job by this guy, David Wall, a modern-day V8 supercar star and certainly a second-generation racer. His dad, Des, I'll always remember that very, very cool sports sedan. Main straightaway, working the wheel pretty hard, got the tail out. Nice job, and he'll be a very happy man. The Apex Replicas on board sees David Wall. Listen to that. Oh, love that sound. He actually buttoned off towards the end.
He did indeed. The Sydney Sider in front of a big local contingent. He's got his family out here. Wall Racing have about 4 or 5 cars on display. John Bowe couldn't do anything about David Wall in that race, but as he gets more experience behind the wheel of that ex-Bob Jane Monaro, we'll see John Bowe a little bit closer.
As we look at the results right now, it's Wall over Seaton and Bowe. Brad Tilley actually got himself up into 4th. Aaron Seaton, nice job. Quentin Bland, Daryl Hanson, Johnny Burke, Alan Main, and Greg Luca rounding out your top 10. Mothers, polishers, waxers, and cleaners bringing us Group NB. Oh, there's some ripping cars out there. How about the Jag, Luke West?
The Jag. Well, there's a few British cars out there, and the man they're going to need to beat is the one we're on board with, Philip Woodbury.
Yes, absolutely up on the point position. You got to love the juxtaposition of the historic cars with the modern day kit that they're all wearing, all fully decaled up. Plenty of corporate sponsorship on from their regular motorsport commitments, of course. Let's look at the grid. We've got Ford Cortinas, you've got Morris Coopers, you've got Mini Coopers, EH Holdens, Lotus Cortina Mark 1s as well. Greg Topher in the Ford Mustang. Look at the gauge set like that across the dash. Good grid too. What a lineup. Mustang on the front row up against the Mini.
And it's Woodbury that leads the field away. He's going to really struggle when we get down at the end of the first lap on that main straight. The Minis, the 4-cylinder Minis up against the Mustang V8s. It's going to be fascinating to see how this pans out.
Craig Stevenson there in the EH Holden. The Minis are all over the Mustang now down into turn number 2. There's 4 of them up against 2 Mustangs. Bit of a lock-up just then from the 155 as they make their way into turn 1. That is Santino Di Carlo.
Yeah, I love the gauges there and where they're set. It's a bit of fabrication work there with the metal with Greg Topher. He's been on the racing scene, in particular the Group N scene, forever.
Oh, look at that. There was no room there. The Mini just moved up. I tell you what, you had to be a fairly brave sort of a cat to run a Mini against these big cars back in the day.
Well, I reckon they're ganging up on the Mustangs. You'd think it'd be the other way around, but there's safety in numbers.
There's the Jag. What a magnificent piece of motorsport that is. Andrew Bergen, we ride on board the Mini and Moke World entry for mothers, polishers, waxers, and cleaners, but he's got his hands full with this Mini out in front.
Wade, it's fantastic to see Andrew here this year. 12 months ago, corresponding event, he had to be cut out of his car, another Mini, so the fact that he's A-OK wasn't quite the case for his car, but he's got another Mini up the front of the field.
Courageous return to competition. We see one of the 2 EH Holdens just in there. You've got a Cortina thrown in. There is 1,000 Minis out there. You've got Holden. Gee, the 87 car is gorgeous as well. That's Philip Taylor in the Lucky Phil Racing entry. Of course it is. The big Mustang, bright yellow, the 132 car on screen right now. Bob Monday, there's a great name.
Well, a yellow car on a Monday, brighten your day at the beginning of the week.
The J82 there just as well. That would be the Claude Cicatelli entry. And don't the crowd love these little Minis? It doesn't matter what era you're from. Everybody loves to see a Mini. And now that is just outright horsepower. You can't do anything about that Minis. You have to work for it in turn 2.
Well, that's just outright depressing if you're a Mini driver.
Yeah, but look at this now. Look at the comeback towards turn 2. Under brakes. These are where these cars were just lethal, weren't they?
very much so. Woodbury's green machine there, carrying car number 13. That, of course, is significant for mini runners. It was number 13, 13C, the Bob Holden and Ronno Altonen drove to victory in the 1966 Gallagher 500, the big event, the big success for mini in this country.
The EH's gotta love I guess for kids watching this, that's actually the gear stick up there on the column, a column shift. And, you know, we take it for granted, Luke, because I remember Dad driving that sort of stuff, but for kids now, they'd be going, what's he doing up there with his left hand? And he's back here all over the back of the Mustang. This is where they've got to be nice and close, because if this Stang gets a break, they're not going to catch him. No, they won't. And we've seen over the years plenty of swapping of positions. It's actually been a tradition at the Muscle Car Masters, Mini versus Mustang. We had a dedicated race last year. Look at that. There's a graphic illustration of understeer. That is what you do. You don't lift. That's what he did. He just didn't lift. He just held it flat. And that is the beauty of the Mini. The handling of it is what absolutely doesn't. Now, they've kind of got to block him in here. They're not going to get to do that because they're going to watch him drive away in a straight line again. So they have to drive the wheels off these Minis just to stay up with the 132. Yeah, I would suspect that maybe Bob Monday made a little mistake going through, coming around Corporate Hill there. Enabled the Minis to nip past him, but he was able to respond and go, nah. I'm back in front within a corner or two. Back on board with Topher. He's trying to split up these Minis right now. Gets a big run down the outside again. No room there. I don't imagine that dash was factory standard the way it's got those gauges set. No, well, Topher now has to put his head down. He's got rid of those pesky Minis. Now he's got to try and find something to knuckle down and get on the tail of Monday. Look at this, though. They dance around on the front end, these Minis, don't they? Can they knit up the inside? There's 4 of them in a row here. Let's take a look at the replay right now. Your mother's polishers, waxes, and cleaners replay. And just watching this little Mini, he knows that Mustang's going to get a run if he doesn't get a move on, so he just bangs it through the box, try and pinch off the corner. And look at it. Look how close they are through the mirror. They're all over him. You don't reckon those ripple strips, you get a bit of vibration through there as well. This is a great pass. Yeah, very much so. He just said, I'm going for it. And to the credit of Monday, he said, yeah, you can have it for the moment, but I'll get you back. Yeah, and I tell you what, those 4 Minis have not let him go either. There is DiCarlo in the 155. So these little guys, they are not too far behind. It's almost like the Italian job out there, Westy. I was going to say, do you have the Self-Preservation Society playing in your head? I most certainly do. And Woodbury there, it's a thumbs up. I think that is a lap car. I don't know. I think he's just having a ball. I think he's just having a good time. Okay, it's one of the front runners now experiencing some problems. Here we go. Up the inside comes Topher. Gorgeous looking pair of Stangs here. Perfect pass. Now, can he get across? Yes. Good pass. Makes himself the new race leader. A little bit of smoke coming from the second of the Minis just then. It just goes to show you how much fun they're having when you got time to take your hand off the wheel and throw the big thumbs up to your rivals. Something flapping at the bottom of the front of the spoiler there on Topher's car. I don't think it's a static strip. No, it hasn't been a problem for the last couple of laps. Been doing that for quite a while. So a pair of Mustangs leading home a quartet of Minis. What's plural for Minis? Is it Mini? Mini. Yeah, I thought you might say that. It's a school of Minis at this particular juncture as the 12 car now. Bergen closing in once more. Gee, they get all over the back of them there. Around the back, these Minis are exceptionally quick. Here's where you don't lift. That is total commitment. Again, it's Groundhog Day. Up the inside. Careful. They've got to use the brakes. He's not going to move that Mustang out of the way. That's a great pass. Yeah, bad news for Monday because he was starting to think about making a move on our race leader, Greg Topher, and had to give way to the Mini. And car 209. Yeah, 289 actually. 289, Rose, my apologies. The Rose's Cafe entry. And here's a replay of this pass for the race lead. Just from 4th back into 2nd. It's like the, you know what, in a shirt sleeve, isn't it? The old H pattern. Certainly pretty loose inside that operation. You're working the wheel. Seems like they have to really drive those cars a lot harder back in the day. They certainly didn't have the performance characteristics that the modern day supercar or touring cars do. Still that smoke pouring out of the 12 car of Bergen. Maybe a slight problem there. Good pass, however, on the inside for the 62 car of Chris Collette in the Coastwide CustomCars.com.au entry. Is that a Galaxy?
It is.
Oh, how good is that? That is a very, very big car in behind the Jaguar as well. Imagine driving one of those things back in the day.
7 litres and has a Lotus Cortina right on his tail. In fact, that Lotus Cortina is going to nip down the inside. Is he? No, not for now at least.
Checkered flag can't be too far away as we watch the USS Enterprise zipping around Sydney Motorsport Park just ahead of the Cortina. There was a bloke named Peter. He used to be pretty handy at getting a massive big Chevy Impala around the racetrack back in the day too, right? The legendary Peter H. How good was he? I used to tune in just to watch him. Checkered flag not too far away, and this has been a good battle. The Minis have really served it up. Not quite going to get the job done because the straight line speed will be the killer. But Philip Woodbury, nice job. Monday, however, and Topher will do the job. But that's a good race.
Certainly is, and you always see the Mustangs. They have something in reserve for that run down the straight, don't they, to the finish line. So 2 Mustangs lead across the line, the 4 Minis, and good news, Bergen was able to cross for 5th place.
Topher the winner from Monday. Woodbury, Collette, Bergen, DiCarlo, Draper, Berry, Burns and Stevenson rounding out your top 10 for mothers. Hope you've enjoyed what you've seen so far. The good news is there is plenty more column shift corralling and H-baton heroics coming up after the break. Luke West's favourite categories are up after this. It's Heritage Touring Car Racing from the Australian Muscle Car Masters. Welcome back to the Australian Muscle Car Masters here at Sydney Motorsport Park, and suddenly I have goosebumps. Luke West, there is a lot of iconic motorsport muscle out there.
Very much so. So we have the Group A and Group C machines. So the spread from 1973 right up to 1992.
Just incredible when you look at how bare the dash were. You know, the steering wheel, there was just no telemetry, no technology at all on the dash, the steering wheel. None of that was even heard of back in the day, Luke.
Yeah, certainly in the Escort there. But I tell you what, plenty of telemetry when we get to the front of the field in the Nissan GTR. So the Escort in the same race as the Group A GTR Godzilla.
And John Bauer's doing, well, several different drives throughout the course of the weekend. As we see the 77 car, the TTA Heritage entry of John Abbott, the Toyota Supra. That looks cool.
Yeah, ex-Peter Williamson machine, and very special mobile that John Bauer is behind the wheel of, and that is the Volvo from 30 years ago, back
Rolling
on the track.
Start too as well. Tony Alford, the Nissan GTR R32, leads him down into turn 1. And man, this covers so many great cars, doesn't it?
Yeah, so the early cars, the Group C machines, the more basic cars, that's the earlier era and more modern era at the front of the field, the first 3 cars at least, Group A.
Kerry McMahon just then reminds me of the Tony Longhurst style Sierra situation back then as we go on board with Gary Kerwin in the VL Holden Commodore. This is Shannon's Share the Passion, your Heritage Touring Cars, Group A and C combined.
Great to see the RX-7 out there too. And the XD Ford, Skyline, a bit smoky, so big variety of cars there. David Toe in the BMW M3. So he's putting the pressure on the Keem-driven ex-Laurie Nelson Mustang. So 2 Group A cars, and Jim Richards behind them in the 635.
It's remarkable when you just think about the names as well as you think about the cars, when you see body shapes like that, when you think back to even guys like the late, great Greg Hansford, who was pretty handy in an RX-7 as well. On board with John Bauer, the Mark Petch Motorsport entry. And Bowie looking pretty casual on the Volvo then.
Yeah, he's had some problems with his car. It's its first meeting in Australia in 30 years. He drove this car in the endurance races back in 1986. They've got a turbo boost problem in that car that they haven't been able to fix. So it's just something John Bauer's dealing with.
Now, none of these are basically built from the ground up. They're all the original cars, which makes this an even more amazing story.
Yeah, they're priceless. So instead of being in museums, they're being raced, and we really have to pay credit to the drivers and the owners of these cars that they've been willing to get out there and put these valuable cars on the track and put on a show.
Well, I mean, they're race cars, aren't they? At the end of the day, I know you don't have to understand that when you've got $300,000 or $400,000 tied up, but they are race cars, and we are the lucky ones that get to see them cranking around here.
So the BMW M3, I want to talk a little bit about the car 2 spots behind it. The sister car, the earlier car, the 635, driven by Jim Richards. It's been brought to the event by its owner, Pete Sturgeon. And if you want to get a good driver for your
Yes.
BMW, who do you put behind the wheel? And, well, none better than the original driver as he darts down there, down the inside of Greg Keane in the Ford Mustang. Jim Richards behind the wheel, being reunited with the car that he drove over 30 years ago.
Now we just need some pouring rain, and Jimmy will be absolutely untouchable because he was known as the Rainmaster, wasn't he? And that's what's great about it. I mean, we're getting a profound sense of enjoyment watching these cars, and so are the spectators. But imagine what it's like for Jimmy, and John Bauer, guys like that, being behind the wheel of these cars again.
Gary Kerwin, so one of the Group A cars from the late 80s, the VL Commodore, putting the pressure on a car that's about 10 years, early 80s car, about 10 years younger.
Just look at off the left-hand side, the air conditioning vents, everything's still absolutely the way it was when it rolled off the showroom floor. Admittedly, it's been slightly gutted. Not all the upholstery is the same as he follows the big number 22, John Mina, the XD Ford Falcon. Love the John Sands Games sponsorship on the back as well.
Things for your hands and things for... I can't even remember what the slogan was. Anyway, there is the Wilmington, ex-Gary Wilmington, Rolly Walker. So that was a Jaguar dealer back in the day, Jaguar. And that car was driven by the big name of Australian motorsport when it comes to sponsorship and characters, and that was Peter Jansen. Here's a replay of the start.
We just saw Tony Pallis there in the Jag, and here, as you said, good start for the Nissan. It's always going to be a rocket off the line. Would you say that Scaife was probably the most famous of the Godzilla cars back in the day?
Well, I guess with his teammate Jim Richards, definitely. Ed Singleton, this is a magic machine. He's aboard Elvis.
Oh, but look at the straight line speed. Up the inside, fair old sort of a start. There's a name, John Goss. Had the pleasure of meeting that man, thanks to you actually, at Oran Park Raceway back in the day.
Replay of Jim Richards getting ahead of Greg Keane. The Keane's from Gunnedah in northern New South Wales.
When you think about these style cars, the Percy Crompton entry, of course, there's another great duo in the Percy Crompton. I always think of Larry Perkins. For me, that was sort of the car that I associated him with, but many Holden heroes drove that car during the day in the Tooheys 1000 side of things back in the day.
Yeah, so 2 cars being run by Ed Singleton this weekend. He's been aboard the Falcon, the ex-John Goss car. Now he's aboard Elvis, the STP Commodore. You can see that it doesn't quite have the size of the Falcon XC hardtop. So must have had some issue with the Falcon. He's climbed aboard his other ride, Elvis, the ex-Alan Grice STP Commodore.
And called Elvis because it had more hits?
Correctamundo, Fonzie.
Yeah, rightio. I love the size of the rear tyres on the Falcon back in the day as well. The big tubs, they just look tremendous, these cars. The Blues Union sponsorship, Sands cards as well, as we see the Jag parts, McFarlane Generators entry of Kerwin climbing all over the back of him. Ford versus Holden, the way it used to be, Lukey.
Yeah, John Minna in the number 22 car. That car was originally run by one Rusty French, who is now the principal co-owner of ProDrive Racing Australia, the leading Ford team in the Supercars Championship.
And Rusty is a massive car enthusiast across many different levels. Actually owns a couple of the Donny Shots sprint cars as well. Whatever goes fast, Rusty's usually got a couple somewhere in a garage. Looks like a bit of moisture on the racetrack a couple of times. Just saw a little bit of dampness just then into turn at number 1 and 2 as Kerwin has got away now as we see this battle between the RX-7 and the Commodore.
Yeah, so that's the RX-7 of Peter Ingram battling Norm Mogg in the ex-HDT car. There's Elvis. There's the outside shot of Elvis with Ed Singleton behind the wheel as he rounds up the ex-Bob Holden Escort there.
Now, why do I relate Alan Grice to the Roadways red, white and blue colour scheme? Did Grice ever drive anything like that?
Yeah, for a year or so, 1983, part of the Roadways team. And that was a Tasmanian organisation. So this was actually the T car for Grice and Bond, Bathurst 1983.
Great little car, the Ford Escort. I drove one on the road. It was my second ever car. We take a look at a bit of a replay of the Ed Singleton entry. And Elvis Pulls out of the draft very nicely here. They'd be still clocking some pretty reasonable speeds here.
Yeah, well over 200 kilometres an hour. And tell you what, that feels all very secure in one of these old cars until you get to the first turn.
That was a great battle, wasn't it? The Keogh and Newton livery on the side there. You're watching the Australian Muscle Car Masters from Sydney Motorsport Park, and Shannon's Share the Passion, bringing you the Heritage Touring Cars Group A and Group C combined. And this is a good little battle Kerwin's going to come up on right now.
Yeah, Kerwin aboard the ex-Gerald K Jag parts Commodore, and Gerald K, he was a stalwart of the Group A scene in Commodores right through the 80s and early 90s.
I just love the sound. Just listen to this thing working the gears. You have to be really careful through this section. You can't just rail it like the minis were earlier in the day. They don't quite stick like this. This is a really good battle now.
So Peter Ingram in the Lazy Maze Mazda RX-7. As I said, fantastic to see the RX-7 out there. There's not too many survivors from the Group C era because most of them were turned into sports cars, sports sedans, I should say, once the Group C category came to an end at the end of 1984. So a couple of survivors, and fantastic to see that machine on track.
I'd love to see Ryan Hansford drive an RX-7 one day like his dad did. Of course, Ryan has gone on to some great things in the V8 Ute side of things. He's a pretty handy wheeler, just like his dad. It'd be really cool to see him drive on one day. Meanwhile, the Esky is looking pretty racy right now.
Yeah, that's Justin Matthews, and he's putting the pressure on Jamie McDonald in the ex-Steve Masterton Commodore.
Bob Holden Motors, another just iconic name in Australian touring car racing. Fans really enjoying this class. I think everybody relates to it in some way. Look at the Escort up the inside. Not quite going to do it in a straight line, but in terms of nimbleness, the Escort's going to have it all over the Holden.
Yeah, actually Bob is in this field. I think that might be him there at top left of the screen in the Corolla. Meantime, back up front, and it's all Tony Alford. In the ex-Mark Gibbs, Bob Forbes entered GIO Nissan GTR, and he is streaking away from the field. And he's got a collection of these Nissan Group A and Group C cars, and this is the one, most of the museum pieces, this is the one he chooses to race.
Normally you'd see Tony in something that's bright pink if you follow any sort of history with Tony's racing over the years with the Donut King side of things. Good drive, just drove away right off the front of the grid and never really got anywhere near the rest of the field, just drove away. Norman Mogg, Normie doing a great job, and we're wrapping up this race which has been exceptionally well received by the fans. Great sounds, great looking cars, and Kerwin's done a good job here.
He has indeed, and doesn't quite have enough there to pip Norm Mogg at the post.
So good racing, and your results for Group C and A combined. Tony Alford getting the win from Kerry McMahon, David Toe, Jim Richards, Greg Keane, Axiak in the 6th position, Normie Mogg, Gary Kerwin, Peter Ingram and John Mina, your top 10. Time for a momentary lapse of reason here on the Australian Muscle Car Masters, and when we come back we have 2 more races to go, and they are beauties. The Valvoline Australian Trans Am Trophy Race is next. Welcome back to Sydney's Motorsport Park for the Australian Muscle Car Masters. We have 2 races to go. They are beauties. Luke West joins me, the editor of Australian Muscle Car magazine. And there are some wild looking bits of kit out here. And you talk about wide diameter tyres, Lukey, and big horsepower. This is what we got here.
Yeah, this is rewinding to the glory days of the pony car, the Trans Am series, the famous category in the US, and legendary tracks over in the States.
I just noticed John Bauer's autograph on the dashboard of the 10K car just then. As well as we take a look at your grid, we have Pontiac Firebirds, Ford Falcon Sprints, Ford Mustangs, as you said, Chevy Camaro, so a little bit of everything, but plenty of grunt to be right on board. The Valvoline onboard camera for Shannon O'Brien, the O'Brien Motorsport entry. Looks like we're going to be a rolling start for this one, Luke.
We are indeed, and this field, massive horsepower about to be unleashed. Shannon O'Brien and the Pontiac Firebird to lead them away.
Oh, very good launch off the second row just then. They make their way down the main straight into turn 1. 2 car, this looks spectacular. Shannon O'Brien, the O'Brien Motorsport Pontiac Firebird, is your leader. We go on board with Johnny English in the English Motorsport entry.
Oh, John's been on the scene for a long time. He won't like me saying that, but Bathurst 1000 competitor and one of the principals of this fantastic category.
Brett Curran's 52 car looks wild as well, doesn't it? Throw in the number 20S car just in there. We need to clarify who the 20S is, as we see the 55 of Russell Wright charging hard.
It is indeed Ian Palmer. It was his other car, the Cuda, he didn't bring, but he's aboard another machine today.
Very nice. So many turns lock to lock in these cars, isn't there? You really do have a handful with them, and so much horsepower on such a big wide tyre. They're a real handful. The Anglers Meets entry of Curran in that good little battle with the 55 of Russell Wright. Whoa, not too hard to step him out either, is it? Just saw then Shannon O'Brien nearly lose the lot. Now, where is Charlie O'Brien?
Well, he was competing earlier this weekend, and in one of the first races for the Trans Am cars, unfortunately broke a shock absorber, and would you believe that caused other massive damage, including holing the radiator.
That's a shame, because Charlie is still an outstanding wheeler and a lot of experience, that's for sure. Still pretty handy in a V8 Ute too. He's driven a fair bit over the last few years in V8 Utes whenever he's had an opportunity come up as well. Rob Rubis, Ford Mustang, the Fat As Competition Engines entry, charging in there as well. Smallish field, but very competitive.
Yeah, a tribute series to the glory days of Trans Am, the pony car wars between Mustang, Camaro, Firebird and the Challengers. And as we look at the car, the 52 of Brett Curran.
I thought that was going to end up very, very pear-shaped. Just got that 55 in his gun sights of Russell Wright, the Mustang, the 5-litre. That thing at Palmer's does look pretty sexy. The 20 car, big numbers, big tyres, big horsepower. Lots to love about this class. Brought to us by Valvoline, the Australian Trans Am Trophy Race.
We've seen the Mustangs dominate this category over its first 3 or 4 years. It had its origins in Queensland, still races predominantly in the Sunshine State, with 1 or 2 outings outside of Queensland each year, including to the Muscle Car Masters. Mustangs have dominated, but in recent years, Wade, the Pontiac Firebird have been competitive. Indeed, Charlie O'Brien is the new champion. This is a non-championship race for Trans Am, but at the completion of the points-paying rounds, it was the veteran Charlie from Holden Dealer Team days, remember, in the Tirana, who's still racing on and winning championships today.
Here's a replay of the start from John English's point of view. And just a great start, but then denied. The 2 car of O'Brien just squeezes back in, and you saw then Curran. So he might have just bogged down a bit on the start, the 52 just then of Brett Curran, and that's where we saw Palmer trying to sweep out to the outside and almost had the 11 car of John English squeezing through in the Pontiac Firebird. They walk around a lot on the tyres themselves, don't they? You see them really get some attitude getting in and out. When you're dealing with so much horsepower, you can kind of get yourself out of trouble, but at the same time get yourself in there as well. Sydney Motorsport Park for the Valvoline Trans Am, the Australian Trans Am race. I noticed too in the list Shane Wilson, the Ford Mustang, colour listed as school bus yellow.
Yeah, it's very descriptive. It immediately puts that colour in your mind as we look at the 55 car of Russell Wright.
Are they running a control tyre or anything like that with these cars, Luke?
I've got to tell you, I need to do my homework on that one.
I'm going to throw that one at you just randomly. palmersteel.com.au sponsorship. Oh, again, a couple cars right on the ragged edge. O'Brien fires up the inside on English and puts that move on. Oh, geez. I don't think the lap times are too impressive, but who cares? They are really getting these things tailored.
Yeah, John English there. Remember the year 84 at Bathurst in the midnight blue, very dark blue Falcon XD, and coming down the mountain punched a big hole in the wall going over Skyline. Still racing it.
How old are you then? I was 13.
I was about 10.
Yeah, but you still remember it like it was yesterday. Valvoline on board, showing Shannon O'Brien out the back windscreen as English tries to make some ground on him at Sydney's Motorsport Park for another phenomenal running, the 12th running of the Australian Muscle Car Masters. It's really an event you can't afford to miss because there's so much more that goes on apart from what's on track, Luke.
Yeah, very much so. Car corral for the show and shine, but all the action at the moment is on the track. And the number 20 machine of Ian Palmer. Usually he races a Cuda, and it's the more Mopar machine, but aboard this weekend, number 20, the Firebird.
Rob Rubis, that 31 car's kind of got my attention as well. Throw in the 99 of Shane Smollen. Shane Smollen has a bit of lap experience to his name around the traps as well. In that big Stang, got the tail right out just then. Built Ford tough.
Yeah, mostly in Porsches, isn't it? Porsche Carrera Cup, Shane Smollen, and GT cars.
Pretty different to what he's running out there at the moment.
Very much so. Number 31. These two cars, these two Mustangs, have the paint schemes that were run back in the day in the Trans Am series by the two factory teams. And we see that increasingly in Australian motorsport, those retro paint schemes, and bring them on, I say.
Looks like John English has English Motorsport have at least 3 entries in the field, including Shane Smollen. You also throw in Lindsay Kearns in the Ford Mustang as well, and John English in the 11, who we join right on cue. And the Valvoline on board right here.
Yeah, John's been working very hard to build this category up, done a great job, and the numbers are growing. So their 3rd appearance at the Australian Muscle Car Masters, and we'll see them again, I'm sure.
These are the replay shots from our Valvoline replays of O'Brien having a really good tussle with English.
So we're looking at Rob Rubis. He's a local lad in the Fat Ass Competition Engines Mustang, leading Shane Smollen in the car that's actually owned by John English.
Yeah, remarkable the contribution that the English Motorsport team has to this particular class. They own at least a 5th of the field that's rumbling around out there at the moment. Good to see the weather has held out. These cars, can you imagine these cars in the wet?
Well, we had wet conditions last year. They were very spectacular, let me tell you. They didn't hold back, let me tell you.
Well, right at the moment, Palmer's not exactly holding back either in the 20 car. Can't be too much longer left in this Australian Trans Am race, thanks to our friends at Valvoline. And good battles wherever you look. Only a small little field, but certainly they haven't lacked anything when it comes to entertainment. Smollen, again, climbing in behind Rob Rubis in the Ford Mustang.
Yeah, chatting to some of the boys in the paddock way, they're really excited. They're going again to New Zealand to race over the summer. Of course, the Kiwi racing season is predominantly in January and February, and they're going to hook up with the historic touring car class. Historic muscle cars in New Zealand get together and they have a bit of a share arrangement. We see those Kiwi cars come to Australia every 2 years, and the Queenslanders, predominantly Queensland Trans Am field, go over to those big historic events in Kiwi land.
I was just going to say that the Kiwis have a really proud history with Trans Am racing. It's pretty big over there, isn't it?
Yeah, very much so. So echoed what we had in the early 1970s with the likes of the Alan Moffat Boss Mustang. So ex-Trans Am machines came to Australia and raced for the Australian Touring Car Championship in the early 70s, and also came to New Zealand, also other cars. So they've got a bit of a parallel history in New Zealand.
And to all of our Kiwi friends listening in and tuning in, we hope everybody's okay after that very nasty earthquake situation just recently. So big motorsport community in New Zealand, and we love to race against and play against New Zealanders in any field of sport. And we certainly stand shoulder to shoulder in situations like this. Field starting to wear down towards the last couple of laps of this Valvoline Australian Trans Am Trophy race at Sydney Motorsport Park for the Muscle Car Masters. This little battle has raged on for most of the event, the 68 and 33 respectively. The 10K plant hire of Anthony 10K. However, here is Harry Shower-Alambus in the Mustang having a speculator. Oh, he's gone! Oh, thank goodness he didn't get him. I thought he was going to be all sorts of trouble then, and Team Hollywood managed to slip by as well. That was close.
Yeah, so finding the limits and then some. So Harry is a newcomer to the class, so learning very quickly, and I guess you do learn from your mistakes.
Thankfully, he didn't tag the other car. Look at this, the 31 car all over the shop. Rob Rubis Are they wearing the tyres out or just having fun? Either way, we're starting to see that this is the replay. I think he realised, I'm in here a little bit too hot, jabbed the brakes, turned the rear, and fortunately, it didn't pick up too much speed across the grass and tag his combatant. And sneaking around the outside was Andy Clemson, who probably had a bit of a grimace there at one point as well. Smollen has managed to get by in the 99 car after a bit of perseverance.
Yeah, he's got ahead of Rob Rubis from New South Wales.
They just sound great. It's one of the best parts about this category. Fans enjoying this whole weekend. And after 12 years of it running, it gets more and more popular. Last lap now. And this battle continuing to rage. Once again, the 31 car having a sneaky look up the inside. Rob Rubis, can he get by Smollen? Oh, sideways again. Have a crack, Rob. Have a crack, son. Cost himself a bit of ground, unfortunately. The Mustang Auto Parts entry is very taily off the corners.
Yeah, we've seen these cars. They've got very squirmish, haven't they, as this race has run down, and it's provided some opportunities for those cars and drivers that have just been the drivers have been patient just to wait and look after their tyres and brakes and pounce as the cars in. Harry Charalambous, big accident. Turn 1.
Oh, that is just heartbreaking. Extensive damage. This will certainly bring a conclusion to the event. We were already headed towards the checkered flag, but that is a massive crash.
Yeah, we saw him have the spin just a lap earlier, so making up for lost time. Unfortunately, pushing a little bit too hard, running wide.
Might have to get the Brisbane Collision Centre on speed dial, I think, Lukey, because that car is headed there. Here's your winner. He's going to wrap this thing up, you would certainly think, after a solid drive in the all-white number 2 Trans Am, Pontiac Firebird of the Australian Trans Am race. Well done, Shannon O'Brien. He will get the win in the end. Johnny English was very strong in that battle for second, and this race was unfortunately overshadowed by that nasty crash from Charalambous at the end.
Yeah, Shannon O'Brien, former Formula Ford driver, also in the development series for a number of years, had a bit of a stint away from racing, back in Trans Am and back in style by dominating this weekend.
Good news is that Harry's okay. You can see him climbing clear of the car in just a second by his own steam. Here's a look at the replay. What happened?
Yeah, just missed the apex there and ran wide, and then trying to recover, just speared to the infield. And unfortunately, in the infield protected by that concrete wall.
Right at the moment, you're just a passenger. Just spat the windscreen off the car as well. Let's take a look at the final results. O'Brien, your winner from English from Curran Palmer. Wright, Smollen, Rubis, 10K, Kearns and Bishop rounding out the top 10. Well, it's time for our final break, and when we come back, it's the championship deciding Shannon's Kumho V8 Touring Car race. It all comes down to this Crackfield big race. Stick around. Turn our attention now to the final racing of the weekend. The Kumho V8 Touring Car Series brought to us by our friends at Shannon's Insurance. Let's take a look at your grid right now as they line up for the final race of the championship. Josh Smith and Gary Jacobson on the front row. Michael Anderson and Tony Evangelo. Taz Douglas and Jack Sipp. Tyler Greenbury and Chris Snapper-Smurden. John McCorkindale, Jim Policina, Michael Kane, Warren Millett, Isidoro Ambrosio out of Western Australia, Shane Hunt, Simon Emazides. Oh, big smoke off the line just then, Luke.
And sure enough, Taz Douglas, he wasn't taking risks before. Now he is. He wants to get to the front and win and go out series champion in the greatest possible way.
That could have been a huge wreck on the main straightaway. Jacobson is your leader. The Victorian out of Shepparton. Oh, Evangelo and Douglas nearly getting together if they actually didn't into turn number 2. And this huge field, exceptionally competitive, as you see the dial before your dig car, just going by Jim Policina, a bit further back in the order.
So this big field, final round of their championship, we have a new champion, and as we so often see, gets a little bit scrappy, doesn't it, in the final event of the year?
Taz Douglas on board with the new champion right there as he tries to wear down Gary Jacobson. This class, Luke, very important. It's given these cars a place to go, and what a home they've found.
Yeah, you can politely say that's for drivers on the way up, cars on the way down. That sounds a little bit harsh, but these are the cars that the front-running teams in the Supercars Championship, or the V8 Supercar Championship, just a few years ago were running, so now being used to train the stars of the future.
And there's guys too as well that are sort of hardened veterans of the games, like Gary Manell and Steve Briffer and Warren Millett and guys like that who just want to enjoy their motorsport on the weekend in an affordable manner in that sort of form of supercar racing.
That's right, so some businessman racers out there, and the likes of Tony Evangelo have been on the scene in supercar racing for a long, long time.
John McCorkindale in the dial before you dig entry. And Luke, you've got some of the history from these cars. They've all had relatively famous homes at one point.
Yeah, no surprise that these teams in the V8 Touring Car Series, they want to buy a car with a bit of heritage. There goes Josh Smith down the inside, but looks like he's going to lose a position, is he, to John McCorkindale.
Great little battle. He held on. Nice work. As we see McCorkindale in that dial before you dig car. Let's take a look at Tyler Greenbury, for example, the young guy that came into the game second on the points behind Taz Douglas. It's the ex-Pro Drive Racing Australia car, so again, just a bit of heritage right there.
As we see the number 14 car of Josh Smith, and we'll come back to that point in a moment. Here's this massively successful start for Taz Douglas.
He picked up about 3 rows out of that. Beautiful start. Evangelo followed him through in the Lubramax car. And fortunately, we didn't have a wreck out of all that. Oh, that was close right then as well. Corkindale just gently feeding it in. That could have got really ugly. And went into V8 Utes as well, and certainly been heavily involved in the Clipsal 500 as well as Michael Caine, not to be confused with the very famous actor of the same name, got it all out of shape.
The Italian job's been a bit of a theme of this race meeting, hasn't it?
Oh, geez, the boys are going after it. You said before about the final race of the season. Smurd off the racetrack, gathers it back up. Now comes Sip. That was more of a gulp, straight up the inside. Big pass. I'll tell you what, Kane's not done with him yet, though. Oh, feed the power on very gently there. And we come back to this battle up the front.
Yeah, Josh Smith, in winning the earlier race, he created a little bit of history in that winning that event for Brad Jones Racing. That team has now won races in all 3 tiers of V8 Touring Car and Supercars competition.
That's remarkable, isn't it? What a great ornament to the sport Brad Jones Racing has been, of course, down in Albury in New South Wales, Albury-Wodonga. Great little motorsport community as well, as we see Sip having a crack at Smurden. 5 cars in this battle right now. The Irwin Tools car looks tremendous too, doesn't it? Chris, as usual, does an excellent job. Kane closing in as well. There's now 5 of them in it. Smurden, the ex-Stone Brothers Racing chassis, raced by Alex Davison and Lee Holdsworth in the main game. So plenty of heritage to the car that Chris is driving.
And in Irwin Tools colours back in the day.
Yeah, it just looks like it's basically come right off the racetrack, doesn't it? Looks like they've hardly changed it at all. The veteran out of South Australia still enjoying his motor racing as much as ever.
You do have that element in this series, Wade, where some of the teams are running liveries dating back to those cars' glory days.
Well, look at Michael Caine. Interesting statistic too with that car, nicknamed Cindy.
Yes, ex-Tasman Motorsport, and raced by Greg Murphy back in 2008 and 2009.
Tony Evangelo, certainly a very established racer. The Lubramax number 6 car out there as well, chasing Smith in the Australian the AHS number 14 car. And Evangelo right over him as they come back to the main straight. We're back on board with John McCorkindale.
Dial before you did's been involved in Australian motorsport for a long, long time. Car 69.
Jacobson has just checked out at the moment. Taz Douglas still locked in that second spot. We take a look back once more at the Unichip car. All over the back, and Smurden gets a big wriggle up. Here comes Sip, thinking about the inside groove. Can't quite get it done. Kane is in there as well. Still a 5-car battle. Really good race. Shannon's Insurance bringing you the final race of the Kumho series, and it has been a great championship once again. Again, mate, Smurden, he's just a clever driver. Been around a long time. He'll say, do what you like, you're going to have to earn it. Oh, Kane! Oh, that was very, very, well, enthusiastic. Let's just put it that way. Having a go. He's probably getting a bit frustrated that Sip can't seem to get by Smurden, so he just stepped it up a notch.
Yeah, a few wheels being put off into the dirt now, and the boys getting very, very willing.
Here's a look at it again. Once more, the Shannon's replay. Kane hooking right in there. Oh, man, that could have been so ugly. He's got all sorts of things going on inside that car to pull it up just in time. Sip is frustrated, cannot get by Smurden. He's driving all the good lines. They're not scared to get off the racetrack a bit here either. Final race of the weekend for another successful running of the Australian Muscle Car Masters. And if anything, Chris has gotten away a bit here.
He has. The squabble behind them doing him a big favour. And it looks like he's been driving a little bit cleaner than the other drivers too, so his tyres and his brakes will be in better condition to enable him to fight at the end of this race.
Gee, they pull him back in through turn 2, don't they? Sip gets in nice and close. If anything, they've probably gapped the 2 guys behind this 3-car battle. So maybe Policina has dropped back just a little further. Shannon's Insurance bringing us the final Kumho Tyres Australian V8 Touring Car Series round and race.
So Sip now doing a good job, just lying in behind there, putting the pressure on, trying to find a way past. What's he got?
Oh, up the inside. Sip had a crack. He got by Smurden, and Kane's thinking, I've got to get by as well. It's almost like when someone lets you in traffic. You just got to get in behind the guy that did it. And now Kane is trying it as well.
Otherwise, you get to work 10 minutes later.
Here's this race out in front. Douglas just then, and the Edge car just in behind. So Taz Douglas under a lot of pressure now. The new champ to the right, and Tyler Greenbury in that Edge car. So Holden versus Ford battles going on here. And what a good race this is. Tyler Greenbury, can he make it work on Douglas? Superb pass. Oh, no. Oh, they kept it together. Wow. That could have been a whole lot more ugly than that.
Well, it might get a little bit more ugly. As you see with Taz Douglas has got the guard rubbing on the tyre now through the left-handers.
Now imagine if this had happened in the previous race when they were still battling for the championship. That would have been even more controversial. The 2 guys that got together were the 2 protagonists for the championship when we came into today. Now Tyler, was there contact then?
Yes.
So contact getting in when Tyler trying the outside groove, and he and Taz made contact there. There, is it? Yeah, there it is there. So very fortunate for Tyler that Douglas's car was still there and straightened him up. Wow. Here's a look at it. Boom. There it is. Tyler almost had time to wave. Not that there might have been all 5 fingers on the hand he waved with, but either way, frantic stuff, and they're still going at it. There might be smoke coming off that tyre, but for the moment, it's still okay, Luke.
So Josh Smith now ducks down inside the wounded car of Taz Douglas. And what's happened to Greenbury?
Maybe some damage. He's further back, right there with the Lubrimax car of Evangelo. So we're right on board with Taz Douglas. And he somehow, miraculously, got out of that incident a lap earlier.
So we've got the unusual situation, Wade, of a car that looks wounded faster than the car that actually looks okay after that incident.
Yeah, it might have been something a bit more structurally damaged, or perhaps a tyre issue with our guy that originally, I thought it was going to be a great pass on the outside. Really, Tyler just about pulled off a blinder of a manoeuvre, but you can see now the sting has certainly gone out of Taz Douglas's THR Developments entry. Kane has not been able to get by Chris Smurden. Chris showing that just because there's a bit of snow on the roof doesn't mean the fire's gone out.
On board now with Michael Kane as he tries to zero in on the Irwin Falcon in front.
Oh, Snapper runs a little bit wide just then. Allows Kane just a bit of a teaser. I always associate that power-built name with Jason Richards on the front splitter.
So the nickname of Snapper for Chris Merton, where did that come from?
You know what? I have no idea. I just know it got certainly attached to him with his V8 Ute racing days, and as you know, didn't necessarily have to have a significant link to a nickname in the V8 Ute category. It was just part of your entry.
All right, they're second in the championship, car number 13, ahead of the Lubrimax car, Tyler Greenbury.
Yeah, and that was Evangelo just in behind him as well. So it's certainly been an incident-packed final race of this series. It's all come down to this. Taz Douglas will be crowned the champion regardless, but a little bit of argy-bargy between him and Tyler. I'd be interested to see hear the dialogue between those two at the end of the day's racing. We're getting towards the business end of it. Crowd has certainly enjoyed this. Michael Caine perhaps is a little bit sick of the Irwin Tools logo. What do you reckon?
I think there's a fair chance for that. Here's his opportunity, but he has to go around the outside. Is he able to do it? No.
Not ideal, but he's got to have a go. Oh, Michael, a bit frustrated with Chris Merton then. Just saw the hand come off the wheel, and yeah, so Caney getting a little bit frustrated trying to get by the South Australian veteran. Just gently feeding the power on. You can just hear him. Whoa, 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 whoa. I'm a bit worried this might go a bit pear-shaped, Luke.
Yeah, I think the Irwin car of Smurden now has a target on it.
Last lap. This is Evangelo with the Lubrimax car, and right in behind him, McCorkindale in the dial before you dig car. So there's been a bit of feeling in a couple of different places as we look to wrap up this championship.
The ex-Stone Brothers racing machine there for Tony Evangelou, the Ford. It was actually a car that raced in Irwin Tools colours by Alex Davison and Lee Holsworth.
McCorkindale digging, dialing, doing all those things and trying to get by Evangelo in the Ford. And a pair of the Henrys right there. This guy has been supreme. Out of Shepparton and Victoria, Gary Jacobson will win. There's the GW Racing sticker on the back for Graham and Wendy Earhart, actually in Toowoomba, the folks that prepare his sprint car when he goes racing as well. Great job for him. And Taz Douglas survives a bruising encounter, Luke.
He does indeed. He's our new champ in the Kumho Tyres Australian V8 Touring Car Series.
Certainly not without its dramatic moments, was it the final race? He slows up to acknowledge the pit crew, gives the boys perhaps a bit of a burnout show coming up here. Well done to him. Well done, Jacobson, showing plenty of class to win the final race of the round and the championship as well. There's the burnout. Taz lighting up the bags and the THR Developments entry. Congratulations to him. Fairly talented driver too, it should be said.
Yeah, been on the scene for a long time now. Enduro co-driver in the main game.
Oh, Steve Briffer, the Poco entry, has spat the rear tyre off. So this is Michael Caine, and this is the incident with, oh, wow, Smurden went all on his own. I don't know whether Michael would have smiled or not. What do you think?
Whoa.
Here we go. Taz is pretty happy about the situation. Congratulations, new series champion. Plenty of smoke, plenty of drama here at Sydney Motorsport Park. That is how you celebrate. See the red line inside the dash? It's not exactly sparing the horses. Congratulations, Gary Jacobson gets the win. Well done, Josh Smith. Douglas was third. Greenbury, Evangelo, McCorkindale, Anderson, Sipp, Caine and Jimmy Pollicina rounding out the top 10. So let's take a look at the final V8 Touring Car Series Championship points, and Taz Douglas, congratulations, the winner over Tyler Greenbury. Josh Smith, a lively third, and Jim Pollicina was fourth overall and the winner of the Privateers points as well. Chris Smurden rounding out the top 5. That's all we have time for on today's program. Hope you enjoyed all the action from the Australian Muscle Car Masters. And if you'd like to purchase the DVD with special bonus material as well, check out Australian Muscle Car Magazine. On behalf of the team, Luke West and myself, it's Wade Orn just saying we look forward to seeing you next time.
Coming up after the break, we jump into the virtual racing world with round 3 of the SRO eSport GT Series from the Nurburgring.